Good morning once again. Great, good to see each one of you. Now, when I got into consultancy a couple of years ago, there are a few things I saw. The first thing I saw is that African and Kenyan founders and entrepreneurs are extremely brilliant. True or true? Extremely brilliant. But there's also something else I saw, that our businesses continue to die off with the initial founder. Now, the first client I worked for was in Uganda, a pharmaceutical company. They had been in operation for about 25, 26 years. The founder had run the business, knowing where every part is, everything is, every person is. If a machine has a problem, he knows how to fix it. But unfortunately, he no longer had strength. And the children had joined the business. But as we know, sometimes they do not pick it well as we would expect. And so unfortunately, the business had begun going down. When I saw that, I was wondering, you mean someone can run a business for 25 straight years and then suddenly lose it simply because they no longer have the energy? Then later I came back to Kenya and worked for a business here in Thika that has been in operation for over 35 years. Again, the same problem. The business had been thriving as long as the founder had the energy to run it. But as soon as he no longer had the energy and was slowly exiting the business, again it was coming down. So I was wondering, you mean we put in so much effort to build our businesses, to learn about them? We put in resources, all the ideas, all the sleepless nights. Because again, building businesses in the African market is not a walk in the park. But after all this work, unfortunately, over 85% of our businesses are dying off with the initial founder. Can I pause for a minute so that sinks in a bit? That if I try looking for the third generation businesses in this country, I actually did my thesis on the same, and I was looking for at least some third generation businesses. I could hardly find a handful. They are very, very few. Now, someone has mentioned here that SMEs, MSMEs make up the biggest part of our economy. Now, over 85% of those SMEs are actually family-run, family-owned businesses. Now, family-run businesses have their own dynamics. And I'm sure most of us here would be running family businesses. And we know that a family business has totally different dynamics. Now, a family-run business would be father, mother, the children. Others would be spouse, the husband in the business, and all combinations possible. The dynamics in those businesses, very, very different from a normal corporate. Now, most of these businesses have done quite well. And we could name a number of them. Some have actually grown and actually succeeded into scaling. So that is not the question. But unfortunately, we have a continuity problem, continuing into the future. And I'm sure we have examples of businesses that we knew about, but we no longer hear about. Do we know some? Do we know some of the businesses? Could you tell your neighbor one of the businesses you're thinking about that you knew about and you no longer hear of? Yes, that one that you're mentioning. Now, those are some of the businesses that were doing very well in this country. They had managed to grow and even scale. For some, even scale beyond the Kenyan market into the bigger East African and African market. Unfortunately, there was a continuity problem. Now, this is a conversation that we must have. Because even as we talk about growing and scaling, we must talk about long-term continuity beyond you as the founder or beyond the first generation. And that's why in collaboration with KEPSA, we've designed a program known as Beyond the Founder. As the name suggests, is how can we ensure that these businesses go beyond the initial founder into the second, third, fourth generation? Because why would we want to put in so much time and effort in building our businesses only for them to collapse few years down the line after putting in so much energy and so much effort? And so how do we ensure that our businesses are continuing into the future? Because ideally, it should be that after the initial founder builds to this level, the next generation picks up from that level to the next level, and the third, and etc. And that's what we would want to see in our economy. Because one of the reasons we're even struggling as an economy is because most of our businesses are in the building stage. Because every generation is in the business of building. Because what was built by their fathers, unfortunately, collapsed in one way or the other, so they have to start off again and again. And so even as we think about growing and the conversations we are having in this conference, one of the things we must ask ourselves, even as I exit, is do we have a succession plan? Because succession planning does not start when we are in our 60s or 70s. Succession begins early enough. And I know for us Africans, it's almost a taboo to talk about succession, but it's a conversation we must have. But also secondly, are we beginning to develop the next generation of leaders? Whether your children or even other leaders that we are developing as a business. Because that is what will determine whether we get to the next level or not. And that preparation of successors has to also begin early. I know most business owners will ask me, how early is early? But early is now. We have to begin preparing them now. But the other third thing that is very critical for me is building a strong foundation. Because a house is as strong as its foundation. Is that true? A house is as strong as its foundation. Now, most of us have imagined that what we transition to the next generation is money. But how long does it take for the next generation to squander the money we have built over the years? How long does it take? Very little time. I was having a conversation with one of the speakers before we came here. And he was telling me how one of the family businesses, within 1 year, the second generation had already squandered whatever the father left. For some, even months. Because money is not what we transition. It might be part of it, but we transition a proper foundation. And part of that foundation is systems and structures. Part of that foundation is what I call purpose. Purpose is the why your business exists. If the next generation understood the why behind your business, then you have won. And I'm very passionate about purpose because I'm an author of a book known as Purpose for Impact. And so purpose is very close to my heart. But also the other foundational element is the values that business is built upon. So those are some of the foundational elements that you as a founder have to begin building from the word go, because that is what we transition to the next generation. And so I'm looking forward to seeing each one of you in that forum on the 27th of August. I don't know whether the team will be projecting the link, the KEPSA team. 27th of August. We'll have these conversations that I'm talking about, and even in detail, so that we see how do we ensure that our businesses can continue into the future. How do we preserve what we have built over the years? Because we cannot afford to just be losing all the energy and effort we're putting in. So Ann Wagaki is my name. I run an organization known as ECG Consulting Group, a business consulting, supporting businesses in the in Kenya and the bigger African markets, with footprints now in about 5 other African countries. And we've supported about 5,000 SMEs through our initiatives, including Beyond the Founder, including one we call MSME Growth Academy, etc. And we also support businesses through strategy development, but also implementation, because implementation is where the rubber meets the road. And so this is what we're doing for SMEs and MSMEs across the African market. And I'm looking forward to see all these businesses seated here, still in operation, years and years from now. So ask your neighbor, is your business built to last?
Is your business built to last?